Hey everyone, George here. And, last night I was rewatching the movie Gladiator. And I was going to sit down today and talk to you about that movie, but we're not going to cover that today. I'm going to do that soon. We'll make a video about that soon. Instead, I want to talk about what the focal point of the movie. Everything obviously takes place inside the Colosseum. And I was actually at the Colosseum a few months back, and it's a really cool building, and I really would love to just sit down right now and talk to you about it. So, without further ado, here are 5 lesser-known facts about the Colosseum. Okay, let's start with the name of the Colosseum itself. It wasn't always called the Colosseum. It originally was called the Flavian Amphitheater. That was named after the Flavian dynasty. That was when Emperor Vespasian came into power, and that was 69 AD. So what happened was Emperor Nero was forced to commit suicide. He was sort of overthrown, and he fled. He committed suicide, and that brought in the Year of the 4 Emperors. Not to be confused with the Year of the 5 Emperors, which doesn't happen later on. But anyway, so the Year of the 4 Emperors happens, and it ends with Emperor Vespasian. And that starts the Flavian dynasty. So that's Emperor Vespasian, then you got Emperor Titus, and then you have Emperor Domitian. And then that's it. It was just 3. It was called the Flavian Amphitheater all the way up into the year 730 AD. What happened was there was a gentleman, St. Bede. He mentioned that in one of his writings, he referred to the Flavian Amphitheater as the Colosseum. The reason why he referred to that as the Colosseum was the Colossus statue that used to stand next to the Colosseum. Originally, it was a statue of Nero. He had a statue of himself commissioned because he was Nero. And then when Vespasian, Emperor Vespasian, came into power, he turned that into the sun god Sol. Or if you were Greek, you considered it Helios. But he turned that into the statue of the sun god. So there was like a colossal statue standing next to the Colosseum, or the Flavian Amphitheater. So that's why St. Bede called it the Colosseum. Or really, where he got the idea of calling it the Colosseum was from that colossal statue. But it wasn't until 1000 AD, so like a few hundred years later, like what was it, 270 years later, it wasn't until then was it widely called the Colosseum. So before that time, it wasn't called the Colosseum, it was called the Flavian Amphitheater. Another little known fact is it's not really a little known fact. We know a lot of people died in the Colosseum, but it was used as a place of executions, not just gladiators fighting with each other and then people die that way. They had it where a person was, like a criminal, was condemned to death. What they would do is they would have them play out different scenarios, different stories in like Greek and Roman mythology, famous historical battles, where the figure that they played was someone that would die. So they would play out this whole like spectacle battle, and they would die at the end, and they were actually dying at the end. It's pretty grim, but that's one thing that it was used for. Another little known fact is at one point, people actually lived inside the Colosseum. It was a living quarters. So, how it worked was the Western Roman Empire fell, and a lot of the structures weren't being used anymore. And so between the years of 800 AD and 1349 AD, people were actually living inside the Colosseum. There was a chapel inside there. There was a living quarters. Apparently members of the cloth and monks lived in there as well. The way it worked was there were walls built inside the Colosseum that separated to different living quarters. So the way the story goes, though, is that in 1349, there was a big earthquake, and that scared a lot of people, and they left. And after that year, 1349, no one else lived in the Colosseum. Now, there is the Fragapani family, or the Fragipani family. They were a wealthy family in the Middle Ages. They actually lived there at one point, and they turned the Colosseum into a castle, or some people consider it a fort, but they fortified and turned it into a castle at one point as well. But after 1349, no one else lived there anymore. Another thing is, if you go to the Colosseum, you'll notice that part of the Colosseum is missing. There's like a chunk of it that's actually kind of missing. That was because in the Middle Ages and during the time of the Renaissance, it was considered a quarry. So it was a location, if someone wanted to build certain structures, they would take the marble, they would take the rocks from the Colosseum. Probably the most famous building that is made from certain materials from the Colosseum is St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. Another fun fact is when you're in the Colosseum, you're standing in the Colosseum, it's a very open space. But back in the day, there was a retractable awning at the top of the Colosseum. So it was made of wood and fabric, and it would protect the spectators from like the hot Roman sun. This awning wasn't called an awning, it was actually called a velarium. That was the name of it back in the day. It was called a velarium. And it's actually a really cool name. It's actually a cooler name than awning. So if you're at a dinner party and you want to talk about the Colosseum and just say some random facts, like maybe you watch this video like, I'm going to show off at this dinner party and tell people what's what, you can be like, oh, you know, there used to be a velarium overhead. And then everyone's going to like turn their heads at you. They're like, oh, this guy knows. This guy knows all about the Colosseum. Some people may be like impressed, and other people might be disgusted that you're talking about velarium at a dinner party. Like, But either way, instead of awnings, they were called velarium. It's a really cool fact, and go and impress people with that one. Another lesser known fact is that the Colosseum has a basement. It has an underground area called the Hypogeum. When you go to the Colosseum, and you stand, you're above ground, and you're walking around looking, and you look down, you can look in the center of it, and it looks like there's like a labyrinth, or like there's just like a maze down there. That's the Hypogeum. That's the underground area. That place housed workers, slaves, gladiators, animals, other mechanical devices that were used for the gladiatorial games, for like special effects. There was an elevator, a pulley system that was used to raise animals up into the action. So they would be in there, they'd be in a cage, and someone would be pulling on the chain or rope, and the animal would be raising up. Like in the movie Gladiator, there's actually a couple times that an animal just jumps out of the ground. That's because there's a trap door that's all covered by the sand in the center. This stuff you can't see today because that was all basically the center of the Colosseum where everyone fought was a wooden floor covered by sand. Underneath that is what you're looking at when you're standing there looking like a maze, the Hypogeum. So it would come up and there'd be a trapdoor covered by sand and an animal would just leap out. So I was there day and night, really cool tour. If you are there, make sure you get a tour of the Hypogeum. It is really cool. You won't regret it. Just now I mentioned sand. And sand covered the entire middle section of the Colosseum. That's where all the gladiators fought. It had multiple purposes to it. One of them, like I was saying, was it covers the trap doors for when the animals jump out into the action. Another thing is, which is kind of crazy, but they actually hosted naval battles, like mock naval battles or recreations of famous naval battles in the Colosseum. So that section, they filled with water. And somehow it didn't leak, but they filled that with water, and they had boats, and they had fake naval battles played out. Like they had recreations of naval battles playing out for the spectators in the Colosseum. It was just kind of crazy, honestly. So there you go. Those are some lesser known facts about the Colosseum. So you can go out into the world and impress people at dinner parties, or watch this video and decide that you want to go to Rome and see the Colosseum for yourself. You should go do that, actually. It's a really cool place. Bye.